it is something to say that it's increasingly imperative that every industry and sector of society works and lives in a more sustainable and green way. And culture is not shy of this. So we are looking today at what the culture and creative sectors have to do with climate action. And I suppose specifically, we're trying to tease out how culture can have a transformational role to help society and have a civic change of thinking around climate and our everyday environments. So we hope to kind of shine some more light on that today through our different presentations. So just to look at our program and our list of speakers, first of all, I'd like to welcome Ruth Reichstein, who's a member of the I.D.E.A. Advisory Board to the European Commission, President on the European Green Deal and the new European Bauhaus, and we'll hear from her in a moment. Also to welcome Alice Ryan, who's the Public Policy Manager from the Arts Council of Ireland. She's currently developing a climate action policy and working closely with Claire Buckley from Judys Bicycle. So we'll hear about that policy development and from the great work of Judys Bicycle in this area of creative climate action to date. Then we're going to be joined by Niamh Ní Chonchóir, the Director of Access Ballymun, and artist Maeve Stone, and we'll hear about cultural adaptations, the kind of learnings and the toolkits that have come out of that, and their Green Arts Department coming out of that. That's a Creative Europe project, so that's exciting to hear about. We're then going to be joined by Philipp Dietachmair from the European Cultural Foundation, and he'll talk about the future of artists and green mobility. We're going to join, this is exciting, we're going to join Rita Marcallo and Instant Dissidents live. Yesterday it was going to be live from a train in Italy, but today it's from a minibus in Istanbul. Sorry, if someone could mute themselves there, I can hear a little bit of chatter. I sound like a school teacher, sorry. We're gonna join Rita Marcallo from a minibus in Istanbul, and she's going to talk about Slow-Mo, the slow travel project that was funded by Perform Europe, a performance art piece of work that is traveling from Clough-Jordan in Tipperary to Cyprus by land and sea. And she'll fill us in on that project. So that's exciting. We're also going to be joined by Tanya Bonotti, the Director of Creative Ireland, who will talk about climate action funds and the legacy and learning from those projects and also potential future of that initiative. We will look at, we will talk to Bernadine Carroll from the Irish Architecture Foundation around Reimagine, which is a Creative Ireland climate action project, but more specifically around the workers' villages and the Bord na Móna villages around just transition. So we do have a packed schedule, and we might move on the slide there, Katie, thanks. So I'm going to do a very brief introduction around the work of the desk and Creative Europe, the Creative Europe programme. So the desk is comprised of a media desk in Dublin and one in Galway, and we are the Culture Office, as I said, based in the Arts Council of Ireland. We work closely with our colleagues in the media for various cross-sectoral and events around the year, and we work, as I said, with Leona Cully as our social media and communications manager. And next slide, Katie, please. So throughout the year, we have a program of events, and these we kind of tailor to spread the information around about the program itself, about the Creative Europe program and the opportunities for the sector. But we also develop and advise. So we work closely with the sector. We help them around developing what kind of projects would be suitable for the different opportunities, and we work developing partnerships and advising on the application process itself. We network and we collaborate, so we work like with events like today's, we work with other agencies, we work with our EU colleagues, with stakeholders around specific focused events around the year, and we promote the program. So we constantly promote the Creative Europe program, upcoming deadlines, different specifics about the new programs, results, and the projects themselves. And we promote the results of the funding and other EU opportunities. And if we could, thanks a million, Katie. So we've just begun a new Creative Europe program, and that is 2021 to 2027. And with a budget of 2.44 billion, it's increased over the last program, and it's around the resilience and building up the sectors again. The program is to support Europe's cultural sectors to become more green, digital, inclusive, resilient, and competitive. Next slide there. So we see from the beginning that the program is about becoming more green. Sorry, the last slide. Yeah, thanks. So just to look at a broader spectrum of why the EU funds culture. So it adds intrinsic value, and these are part of the treaty commitments that the European Union has committed to, looking at the development of culture within society and its economic development as well. It's also connected to the broader EU policy, and you see the list there, the Agenda for Culture, Gender Equality Strategy, and within that, the European Green Deal from 2020. So it's very centre and focused around all of the European Union funds for culture, but also the Creative Europe programme itself. And the next slide, thanks, Katie. So just around the programme objectives, it's to safeguard the development and promotion of European cultural and linguistic diversity and heritage, to increase the competitiveness and the economic potential of the creative and culture sector, and in particular the audiovisual sector. And the aims around the programme, the next slide, Katie, please, are, I won't go through them all, but around artistic and cultural cooperation at European level, the creation of European works, sustainability and competitiveness, promoting cross-sectoral innovation. And the next slide, Katie, thanks. And just to finish off, so climate and culture come together very cohesively in the Creative Europe programme. It is called the Greening of Creative Europe, which is looking at contributing to the achievement of an overall target of 30% of the European Union budget within 2022 on supporting climate objectives. So across the programme, they're looking for proposals that contribute to the achievement of these key European policy priorities. And as we said, inclusion, gender equality and environment and the fight against climate change are at the heart of that. So it's really, they are favoured, these types of projects. So it's really encouraged and supported. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Ruth Reichstein. We're delighted to have you here, Ruth. I know you don't have any slides, so we'll just keep up our own slide if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. And sorry, I don't have a visual presentation, so I have to make up with my words. I also have to say that I can unfortunately not stay until the end, mainly because I didn't realize until this morning that there was an hour difference between Ireland and Brussels. So I just have follow-up meetings very soon, but if ever, I'm happy to answer some questions, maybe just after the presentation, if there are any. So, well, this said, I'm very happy to be with you today, and I must say that there are more and more events where the link is made between the climate policy and the cultural world, and I think that's very nice to see, and also very important. Only a few weeks ago, I was invited to a kind of similar event in Tartu in Estonia with people over there who are preparing mainly the Cultural Capital of Europe program over there. And I already said it back then that the link between politics and culture is really of a huge importance, but it's obviously also a challenge to make it. And the president, Ursula von der Leyen, is very aware of this, and is also something that is rather important to her, because this kind of link that we think is needed is, and that is what just came out already in the presentation just before, is obviously also very important for the European Green Deal and to make it a success. And this is why the president launched now almost 2 years ago the European Bauhaus initiative. I will not talk too much about the initiative itself, but rather focus a bit broader on how we think that we should develop further the links in between the different worlds, and also how we think that culture can also contribute to making the Green Deal a success. The president was very clear when she launched the European Bauhaus initiative. She said that this project adds a cultural and creative dimension to the European Green Deal. And this is what we also try to implement since now almost 2 years. Last year in the State of the Union, she rephrased it in the way that she said the European Bauhaus is the soul of the European Green Deal. And behind this is really the idea and the thinking that if we want to bring people along, and that is very well needed for the green transition and to save climate and planet, then we need to touch not only the brain, but also the heart and the soul of people. And this is obviously something that we need cultural actors for, because it's the artists, it's performances, it's all kind of beautiful and sometimes also obviously critical artistic and cultural performances that touch the heart of the people. So this is probably the first reason why it is so important to have this combination of culture and climate, as it's so nicely said on this overall slide. The second reason why the president focused actually on this dimension is that we realized that a lot of actors were not really, how can I say that, completely included or recognized as an active actor in the transition and in the fight against climate change. We saw that a lot when we launched the Bauhaus. There were a lot of architects, but also designers and others who got in touch and who said, we are so happy that you finally see our role and what we can contribute. And that triggered a lot of additional motivation, if you want so, in some of these sectors. And I think that is also very important, that there is a real also just recognition that everybody, really everybody, and every sector and every single person and every person with the different competences and experiences can and should contribute to this transition. Last but not least, also in the Bauhaus, we try to, I mean, there's obviously the whole pillar of really tangible change on the ground, which is then mainly focusing, first of all, on the built environment. So how can we make our buildings and cities more sustainable? How can we make sure that the emissions are reduced and maybe even turn our cities into carbon sinks? But there's also the work stream, let's say, to try to experiment a bit about new ways of policy making. And that is a lot about breaking silos. First of all, also inside this house, we are all very much used to work in the different services, and sometimes you collaborate a little bit with another one, but more or less you're in your silo, be it that it's climate or industry or transport or agriculture. And the European Bauhaus tries to bring really people from the different sectors together. First of all, inside the house, so we have also created a real working group around the European Bauhaus, but obviously then also in the society. And this is something that we are still working on, and where it would be also interesting to get ideas and feedback. How can we actually make this link between culture and politics, or climate politics, also more tangible in the day-to-day work? So because it's not enough to just say, okay, we arrange a meeting between artists and policymakers, because we need to find a common language, we need to find a way to understand each other, and that is not always the easiest thing. So this is also something that we are looking in the European Bauhaus. So then maybe the other way around, what are the tools to support culture, art, and also the creative industries in the European Bauhaus? Well, there is quite a number of things. The first thing is probably that we, and that is a bit what I referred to already earlier, that the NEP is a way of valorizing work that has been done by a lot of cultural actors already for years, who have been working already on sustainability and climate action. And this is something that we try to do very much in the communication around the European Bauhaus, be it on our Instagram account where we showcase projects, be it now with the European Bauhaus Festival that will take place very soon in June, and where I say a bit more at the end of my intervention. A second point is that we try to focus as much as possible in the financing and funding on small projects. So, for example, via the EIT, the European Institute of Technologies, we have several calls that are really financing small projects of citizens and cultural initiatives at the grassroots level. And then we will also have now, that's a call that will open very soon, that will finance artist residencies and places of transformation that are in line with the NEP principles. And this is also something that we are currently exploring together with Creative Europe. Last but not least, we have in the European Bauhaus, the biggest funding option, and if you want so, are our lighthouses. So these are big transformational projects in the member states, and there we also have already now a focus on also the cultural dimension, and most probably in the next cycle of Horizon Europe this will be even reinforced. And then just to finish this this list, if you want, so obviously there is then also the whole question how the NEP principles and values can be implemented also by cultural institutions, both in the buildings, but also content-wise, so theaters, museums, places of culture. So this is a bit what we have on the menu so far inside the NEP. And then obviously there's also a lot of going on outside the NEP, maybe in addition to what has already been mentioned, also in the Next Generation EU, in the big recovery plans, there are 10 billion going towards creative industries. Voilà, so to finish, I just want to invite all of you to participate and follow the European Bauhaus Festival. Thank you very much for having put the link in the chat. So it will happen from the 9th to the 12th of June, very soon, mainly in Brussels, but there are over 200 local events that will happen all over Europe, and everything is streamed as well, so you can follow the discussions online as well. And also that was very important for us that in the program of the festival, as it's really like a bit the very visible event around the European Bauhaus, we really tried to there again break silos and bring as many different actors from different backgrounds together. We have a lot of artists on stage, we have fashion designers on stage, we have designers on stage. We have a whole cultural program with concerts and performances that will happen throughout the days of the festival, because also here again, we are convinced that if you want to interest citizens in what we are doing policy-wise, it works probably much better if you do that with dance and with live painting and so on, than only with very serious policy discussions. But again, it's really something where we try to make as many links as possible, and to avoid that on the one hand then you have a kind of cultural program and then you have the conference happening somewhere else, but really to, as I said, bring also artists into the discussions, policymakers into the cultural part, and to try to create there all kind of possible links. Well, I think I'll stop here. I thank you very much for your attention. As I said, if that's okay, I'm also available to take some questions right away, and then I will just at a certain moment disappear discreetly from the screen. But thank you again for the invitation, and I wish you in any case a very interesting event and discussion.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Yeah, I suppose we'll take the opportunity if anyone has a question for Ruth while we have her here. That would be great. I don't know to see if there was any chats. Does anyone, if you want to put up your hand, do your hand, or just...
Yeah, I don't see any questions there at the moment. Just the Irish Architectural Foundation have a comment there that they actually have an event in the new European Bauhaus Festival, which is great. And the link is in there if people want to have a look.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thanks for sharing that, Bernadine.
I just one question for you, Ruth. This is Eamon at the Socratics. We're working on an idea actually along the lines of one of the things that you mentioned around bringing creative artists, scientists, and policymakers together to come up with creative solutions for new policy, around the green world. What are the efforts that you've seen across Europe in that space, as you kind of alluded to earlier?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's great, and I think would be a lot of interest from the European Bauhaus team if you would get in touch with them directly and maybe also exchange, because I mean they are very much more directly involved in the work. They can probably tell you more about what they have seen somewhere else, but I think that they would be also very interested in your work. What we have seen is that, for example, the I.D.E.A, which is the European Association of Designers, they have also developed quite a lot there in that, that you would use design a bit as this common language that I was referring to earlier, to bridge between the worlds of politics and science and culture, for example. So yeah, I think that would be very nice to look into this. Also, that said, because we have now started, I think a month ago maybe, the lab of the European Bauhaus, which is basically providing an online platform of to work together. And there is also already the idea to maybe also have a lab project around exactly this question of new ways of policy making. And I think yeah, if you're interested, then that would be probably a good place to see, and to also look for others in the community who might work on the same topic already.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Eamon. Anyone else? If there aren't any questions, we might head on. We've got a full house and a full schedule, but it's really great. Ruth, thanks for talking to us, and just to hear that kind of idea of bringing closing the gap on the silos of the different departments, kind of bringing artists and policymakers together, which is definitely something that we're looking forward to more and more in the future. Okay, so we're going to move on, and our next presentation is from Alice Ryan and from Claire Buckley. Hi guys, if you're ready, there we go, to share, I'll hand you over.
Thanks so much, Aoife, and thanks so much for having us today. Ruth, that was fantastic. I think, Aoife, that struck me as well. The breaking down of silos is absolutely something that we're really keen on and looking to do in our own climate action policy. So I just wanted to kind of introduce Claire really and talk about what the Arts Council is doing on this front. Maybe we'll skip to the next slide, Claire, that's okay. So the Arts Council is absolutely thrilled to be working with Judys Bicycle EU on developing a climate action policy. Now, many of you might know Judys Bicycle UK and the incredible work that they've been doing in this space for over a decade, both with Arts Council UK, England, but also across the board. Every time I say they do so much work with Arts Council England, I'm always learning more that they've actually really done loads of work with cities, and I'll let Claire tell you more about that as well. But Judys Bicycle EU actually brings together 3 organisations. As well as Judys Bicycle UK, it also brings together the Green Arts Initiative, who've done incredible work in Ireland across venues, and Native Events, who've been working in the event space to provide green solutions, and who have also actually been doing sustainability and environmental training for our RAISE program within the Arts Council. So we feel really blessed that we're in a really strong place in terms of the experience we have working with us on this. And if we just jump to the next slide, I'll just give you a bit of a heads up of where we are in our own timeline. So we're very much at the beginning stages, but we do hope to have a climate action policy by the end of this year. So you can see there that we're in our review stage. We've been mapping policies, programs, support and research. We've been holding internal stakeholder interviews. we are beginning our external stakeholder interviews. And we will, as part of that, be launching a survey tomorrow, which I'll speak a little bit more about. Then we hope to have an initial review, which will bring together our initial findings, and some roundtables, which will then interrogate a lot of the initial findings that we've come out with. And I mean, I guess, as you can see, or I hope you can see from this process, that consultation is at the very heart of everything that we do in the Arts Council, but it's really definitely at the very heart of how we will be developing this policy. We're very much on a learning curve with this one ourselves. It will not be top down. It's very much about working with those in the industry who are doing great work. It's also very much about working with those who are finding it challenging and you know, trying to identify what those barriers are. And Claire, if you just jump to the next slide. So a big part of understanding where we're at right now will be this survey. So tomorrow, giving you a bit of a plug, Aoife has kindly offered to send out the survey, and we'd love to hear from any of you working in this space, from artists, arts organisations and arts workers, to get an understanding of what's happening, you know, where you're feeling most concerned about. Is it energy? Is it transport? What supports already exist? What supports, and possibly the most important thing, you know, where can the Arts Council help most? Where can we support? So with that, and with the email coming out tomorrow, I'll just hand over to Claire and she can talk to you a little bit more about the work that they've done in the past. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Sorry, I'm just going to share my screen again. It got stuck.
Hey, Jen. Just a little quick voice note. I was on laptop. They're going to give me an update at 2.
Sorry.
But it's all taken quite a while.
Can you please mute?
This time around, and especially with recovery. So he's going to be back in touch with me around after lunchtime. To be the latest update.
Sorry, could we mute there, please?
And I'll check in there again, and I might just crash out for an hour or two here.
Hello.
Okay, and chat to you later.
Sorry. Could everyone mute just to say right now, because we just had a bit of an interruption there, if you don't mind. I know you.
Okay, Aoife, I assume you've muted yourself as well. Thanks to Alice, thanks to Aoife for inviting us to speak today. We are delighted to be working with the Arts Council and in partnership with the Native Events team and Katrina Fallon from the Green Arts Initiative in Ireland, who, as Alice said, have been doing such great environmental work with the events and venues in Ireland. Sorry. So we are, as Alice also said, in the early days of our work with Arts Council, and for now we are mainly in listening and consultation mode. But what is clear is the desire from within Arts Council and across the sector to do an awful lot more on climate and environmental action. I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of the arts and culture in responding to the climate and environmental crisis and why it has such an important role to play. Sorry. The climate environmental crisis is a systemic issue. It's rooted in global, economic, social, cultural, and value systems which lock in unsustainable consumption, inequality, and a disconnection from nature. It stems from the legacy of colonialism, the inequalities of capitalism, and a global north culture of extractivism and growth without limits. We are seeing and feeling its impacts here now across the world, but it is disproportionately impacting those least responsible and the most disadvantaged. Decades of scientific knowledge about the scale of this crisis have not halted record-breaking levels of emissions, irreversible species loss, unprecedented damage to the ecosystems upon which we depend. But we have yet to respond, as Greta Thunberg puts it, as if our houses are on fire. We need policies, we need technology, and we need investment to address this crisis. But if we're really to protect what we love, to survive and to thrive, We also need hearts, souls, and minds, as Ruth puts it so nicely. And we need a shift in our cultural values. And this is why the arts and culture have such a crucial role to play. They are uniquely placed to bridge the gap between what we know and what we feel, and to support the kind of cultural shift we need to address this crisis, bringing innate creativity and resourcefulness to help us make sense of what's happening, to imagine a better future, and to both demonstrate and galvanize action. At Judys Bicycle, we've been working to support climate and environmental action across the cultural community for 15 years. We've seen many inspiring examples of how individual artists and arts organizations are responding through their work, through their practice, and through their actions. On a sector level, what we're starting to see more recently is how new priorities, practices, skills, and investment can kickstart a new creative ecology, generating jobs, driving demand for greener products, services, solutions, while at the same time creating new opportunities for collaboration, for partnership, and for funding. And what we're also seeing now is how many within the sector are starting to address the inequalities and injustices which are both at the root of and exacerbated by the climate and environmental crisis. In particular, connecting with communities, addressing local issues and concerns, from air quality and fuel poverty to biodiversity loss and health and well-being, and working to be part of a just transition for all. Through our work with Arts Council so far, we've already seen some great examples of how artists and arts organizations are responding to the crisis, which do really demonstrate why culture is so important. But I'm going to talk to you now about some examples from the UK. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is Arts Council England's environmental programme, which is delivered in partnership with Judys Bicycle, and building understanding, agency and leadership on climate and environment across the cultural sector in England since 2012. So it's been running for 10 years. As part of this programme, we do an annual report and surveys with about 800 what are called national portfolio organisations funded by the Arts Council. And this gives us some great insights into what is happening within the sector. And just some examples here from the most recent reports. The priorities which are coming from organisations are understanding the impacts of digital working, environmental strategy, planning and policy development, and environmentally themed work. And through the latest survey that we did, we saw that 57% of organisations had produced programmed or curated work exploring environmental themes, and 49% had collaborated with other cultural organisations on finding and sharing solutions to environmental issues. We also asked the organisations what value and benefits environmental action brings. And there have been some great responses here. So 72% found that having an environmental policy was very useful in supporting funding applications. Half have experienced creative or artistic benefits and opportunities. And 72% have reported team morale and well-being benefits through taking action on climate and environment. So we have this great wealth of knowledge and understanding about what's happening in the sector, about their impacts. And within the programme, there are also different strands, and one of them is Accelerator, which is a sector-led programme combining training, mentoring, and peer learning and exchange to develop sustainability leadership. There have been 2 cohorts of 10 organisational consortia doing different pieces of work to advance their sustainable practice. You can find lots of great case studies in the Arts Council annual reports. Two examples here from the Accelerator programme. One is a collaboration between the Barbican Artillery and the London Borough of Waltham Forest, and they have been working together to explore regenerative festival design and placemaking using focusing on a particular event, which is the Walthamstow Garden Party. And they have worked with ecological design experts in that process, using different frameworks to look at how to design the event, and also, of course, working together with the local communities. Another great example from Accelerator is a collaboration between Fast Familiar, Arts Catalyst, and Abandoned Normal Devices. And they work together to explore the impact of the environmental impact of digital artwork. They've developed a new tool called the Network Condition, which is freely available. And they've developed a range of case studies exploring this topic and using the calculator as well. And you can find that information if you look up the Network Condition. So these are just a few examples of what's happening through the Arts Council England programme. I'm going to talk briefly about another programme called Season for Change, which is led by Arts Admin and Judys Bicycle UK. And it's a pioneering UK-wide cultural programme designed to inspire inclusive action on climate change. There have been 15 commissions, 2 programmes of online events, workshops and resources for practitioners to inspire action, and an open programme of events around climate and environment. We just published the evaluation report from Season for Change, and some information from that is in terms of the reach. We've had over 3,000 artists, arts professionals and scientists attending the Season for Change events and workshops. 100 artists and creatives supported with paid opportunities, and 230 events submitted to the open programme. In terms of reach through press and media, the season connected with over 1 million people and engaged with 231,000 people through members of the public through commissions. And in addition, 182,000 people engaged with the programme online. One thing which was really exciting and pioneering about this season was that we also had some research done to see what difference that engagement made. And the audience research showed that exploring the issues of climate change through arts programming is an effective way of engaging people in the debate. And I think this is a really important point. So, sorry, I'm stuck again. I'm just going to give you 2 examples from the, sorry, just go back in, from the Season for Change commissions, which had focus on climate justice. Sorry, so the first example is from a wonderful artist called Lutz, and his work was entitled Heirs of the South Circular. And he developed a music single, a music video, and a comic book, which was addressing the issue of air pollution and really targeting people who lived in this area around the South Circular in London, in Lewisham, which has suffered from some of the worst levels of air pollution in London. And his work was a response to the death of a young girl in Lewisham, Ella Kissy Deborah, whose death was the first death to be attributed officially by the coroner to air pollution. And his this work has had an amazing resonance, and not only locally, but nationally and internationally as well. And the second example, it was hard to choose from the Season for Change commissions, is a work by an artist called Rosie Cisneros, called Roma Recycled, Reuse, Reimagine. And she worked with Roma communities and families across 6 different cities, looking at the issue of recycling and reuse from the perspective of the Roma culture and history and language. And as a result of the project, she developed a children's book and a range of materials which are shared within the cities where she's worked and with children across the UK as well. And this project has had, it was the start of something which is continuing on. And I think and hope with both his examples, you can also see the difference that this work makes, but also to the artists themselves. So I hope that you found those examples interesting. Thank you for listening. And I'm really looking forward to hearing some more wonderful examples from the rest of our speakers.
Brilliant, Claire, thank you so much. And to Alice, of course, we're in great hands. I see, of course, working with Judys Bicycle and the development of the climate action policy for the Arts Council. So looking forward to hearing more about that in the future. I'll hand you over to Maeve Stone and Niamh Ní Chonchóir, and off you go. Thanks a million.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having us to speak about the project a little bit. It's been such an interesting journey, and very glad to say that after a couple of years of interruption, we actually were able to complete the project earlier this year. So my name is Maeve Stone. I'm a theatre and filmmaker as well as an activist. I started thinking about myself as an artist making work in an emergency, the climate emergency, 6 years ago, around the time my first niece was born. When the future suddenly felt like a dangerous inheritance, I started asking, what am I doing? What role does art play in a society in times of emergency? Is it any different to art made in times of safety? And what's the difference if we don't feel the urgency of it yet? It's these moments where the frame changes that allowed me to begin thinking and acting differently. So I've spent the last number of years trying to understand how the skills I've developed working for a decade in theatre and film might be useful in responding to the climate emergency. I've been picking them up and turning them around and using them in odd contexts, feeling for the form, asking questions like, what helps an audience arrive and settle into the world you're creating? Why did this approach connect with the audience more than others? Where do non-verbal approaches offer the most value, etc., etc.? The challenge seems to line itself up quite well in some ways. In the climate crisis, there's a lot of information, a lot of overwhelming science, and a lot of text, but we don't always encounter it in a way that leaves space for understanding at an emotional level. The dramatic impact of is unstructured, and we can struggle to access or make sense of the human emotion in the picture. Maybe we actively avoid the human emotion in the picture because therein lies access to our own feelings. As I learned more about our emerging futures, I found it increasingly difficult not to build these ideas of solastalgia or climate grief into the work I was making. This is an image from a piece called Bodies of Water, which was an immersive interdisciplinary theatre piece focusing on the grief and confusion of an artist coming to terms with the North Atlantic garbage patch. For anyone who's not familiar with this, it's one of 5 gyres in the world's oceans that's become a vortex for rubbish, plastic, anything that we leave into the ocean. So while I've been working for over a decade in experimental theatre, I've begun making films in 2018 as well. Working in a medium like film begins to attune you to other non-verbal forms of communication and the tools we can use to conjure space for emotion. This is a short film called The House Fell, which had its last screening on Achill Island last weekend. And it's a portrait of friendship as a source of resilience in times of grief. My work has always benefited from the disruptive instincts that make me an activist, and equally I've always seen art as a subversive mechanism for responding to inequality, discrimination, and seeding cultural change and structural change. I see the challenge of communicating the emotion of the climate crisis, of finding ways to imagine the future together, of supporting our creative and local communities on that journey of adaptation as one of the most crucial challenges I can participate in. I've also become a member of the NCFA steering group, so look forward to working with some of you in the coming years in that capacity as well. So in 2019, I was selected as the Irish artist for an embedded artist project called Cultural Adaptations, and was partnered with Access Ballymun and I.D.E.A, who are the energy agency for Dublin. Alongside groups from Gothenburg, Ghent and Glasgow, the intention of the project was to answer the question, what is the role of the artist in climate adaptation, and to consider what exchanges might benefit creative thinking across 4 cities with similar climate challenges. It was a really ambitious program with plans for transnational meetings in each city over the following year. So in 2019 November, I traveled by train from Dublin to Gothenburg in Sweden with the other partners. It was a long trip. This is a photo of us arriving, having traveled for 3 days. When we were in Sweden, myself and Jerry Wardell of Codima, he was the CEO at the time, and Emma Connors of Access began the task of discovering how we would collaborate with one another, what language we shared, and how we would begin. As with everything planned for 2020, this project was completely transformed by the pandemic, and my engagement with both organizations became limited to online exchanges, except for weekly walks that I took with Jerry. We were both living in Glasnevin area of Dublin, so we would walk along the canal for an hour or so most weeks, trying to sort of uncover what areas interested us. These walking connections led to the design of the Knowledge Seed Vault, or an intergenerational project that would engage with elements of the Climate Action Plan, which Codima had designed, that would help to reveal where elders in the community can inform local adaptation strategies by learning about specific climate challenges in the area from younger generations. So looking at what a younger generation brought to the table, and also really valuing the experience and knowledge of the elders in our society. These are some of the findings from the project report, which was written by Chris Fremantle. So our efforts to deliver the project were ultimately pretty frustrated by the changing reality of the pandemic. We thought about it a lot, we spoke about it a lot, we designed something really beautiful, but we were not able to actually deliver it. But there was some really interesting conversations that came out of it, and some really important learnings, I would say. It's safe to say the collaborations brought about key changes in terms of thinking for myself, for the staff at Access, and in Jerry Wardell. Codima have gone on to apply for Creative Ireland's Creative Climate Action Fund, which I think marks a kind of continuing interest in this kind of collaborative and adaptive creative process. And my upcoming project, Rising Tide, has been designed in consultation with Suzanne Fitzpatrick from Codima. So that's something that's continuing. I should say the most exciting outcome for me, and I hope for Access as well, has been that I've become permanently embedded at Access as lead artist of the first Green Arts department in the country. So in 2021, we were finally able to deliver a socially engaged climate project called the Community Vaults. And this marked the end of the journey, which began with cultural adaptations. It was a 4-month project, I suppose, working with members of the community. It involved creating a documentary of interviews with elders and young people from the community. It was also an exhibition that ran from the 1st of February until the 17th of March and had huge engagement with it. And we were really thrilled that the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins, commented that it's an exemplary local project and had some really generous things to say about the work we were doing. What it has taught me is the value of reaching backwards to think forwards. And I'd love to quote my favorite person when it comes to thinking about these complex webbed problems. Donna Haraway puts it, good stories reach into rich pasts to sustain thick presents to keep the story going for those who come after. And I think the Community Vaults really sits on the shoulders of that idea. So I'm going to hand over to Niamh now, and I will operate the slides.
Thanks, Maeve. Hello, everyone. For those who don't know, my name is Niamh Croher, and I'm Interim Director of Access, which is an arts and community resource centre in Ballymun, which is quite an urban area in North Dublin. That's quite an important opening salvo, because the Green Arts Department and the legacy of cultural adaptations has absolutely transformed the way we work and think and act, not just as a team in an arts centre, but through all of our creative partnerships, our community partnerships. The lens of the Green Arts Department now goes to our artist support programmes, our cultural contract with the local secondary school. And I'll start with the, I suppose, the admission that 5 years ago, I didn't know or understand what an embedded artist was. It sounded great. And we've now moved to the point where we're very, very fortunate to have Maeve on salary as a salaried artist to lead this department, which covers a number of areas that I'll touch upon in the next slide. But just to say, for us, this work in Access, because we are a creative space and we're a community space, it is imperative. There is no going back, and to find that creative resilience in Ballymun, it's no accident, because this is an art centre that has quite a diverse range of artists exploring and developing their practice. And we do an awful lot of bursaries and residencies, but it's also a community of quite natural doers, organisers and activists, which is why I think work like Community Vaults will only continue to, I suppose, grow and embed itself in North Dublin and in Dublin, and that ripple effect. And that is thanks to the support of Creative Ireland, the Arts Council. We wouldn't be able to invest in this thinking and this shaping through this department without a leap of faith, because there are times when we were planning these projects without perhaps a crystal clear vision as to what the outcomes would be. I'll hop on to the next slide. Thanks, Maeve. So a snapshot of the department at the moment in 2022 would be that we try and touch upon 5 key areas. One being sector resource. So the Cultural Adaptations Project yielded some incredibly useful toolkits, which I think are already linked in the chat, but if you aren't familiar with them, I encourage you to go and check them out, because they do, they're a fabulous starting and continuing point for most organisations. Maeve is also available not just as an artist in Access and as an artist who supports resident artists through us, but to the sector, people can seek out time with Maeve to self-scan their practice with a view to considering how it might be more adaptive and more sustainable. Maeve has also done sessions like this, again, under the banner of the department for the likes of Fringe Festival, 11s, and there is ad hoc consultation and support available there too. The department generates and produces a number of arts projects across theatre, visual art and film, Community Vaults being, a recent example that featured a visual arts exhibition, featured a film, had a very tangible, I have these seed cards on my desk. We have a publication of Wild Weeds of Poppentry Park in Ballymun, things that are surprising people perhaps still, but the richness and that spotlight on Ballymun through the artists in the project was really, really key for us. We're also talking about partnerships with key festivals later in the year to celebrate and reward thinking and changed practice in these areas. Community projects, as we've touched upon, Community Vaults is but one, but we use the department to creatively engage and spark thinking in audiences, community groups and specific targeted groups such as our local schools, but also the local men's shed. Ballymun Tidy Town's now been involved in an arts project, has opened up a whole new realm in their thinking and practice as well. The department facilitates a lot of conversations, and again, these may have started or been necessitated by COVID, outdoor walks. We hosted a series of online sessions during COP26 called COP on I.D.E.A. You can check those out on our website, and we plan to continue those conversations in person, but also online for those who can't reach us and be physically present. And then just to touch upon development, we are constantly thinking and talking about where the resources lie to continue to embed this work. And this also has seen us support, and when I say us, I really do mean Maeve an awful lot, but our learning curve is steep amongst the team in Access, but it's one that we're really getting to grips with as to how we can continue to pull together a hybrid funding model that serves this department, the artists it supports, but then also the audiences and communities it interacts with going forward. And next slide, thanks, Maeve. So this is just a glimpse, and it is more so to highlight that from the not knowing, we now have a dedicated playlist on our Access Ballymun YouTube channel that is everything to do with green arts. That's the wonderful Phoebe Foran in Poppentry Park, and I'd encourage you to go and check it out, because there's a little mini menu of last year's work and some of the outcomes, be they conversations, the Community Vaults video is there itself, and that was, I suppose, that's a glimpse into Access as a full-on organisation getting started, and how encouraging that might be to see how this department evolves in 3 to 5 years' time. It would be remiss of me not to touch upon the Green Arts Initiative, which is supported by the Arts Council, and we are one of 7 art centres on a pilot Greening Arts Centres project, led by Katrina Fallon with Theatre Forum. There we all are when it was being announced. So that pilot is coming to a close, but in addition to this artistic work and creative work, we are also a building, and we're a rather large building as a community centre. In addition to being an art centre, we have a creche, we have a cafe, we have all of the artistic theatre and studio spaces, meaning that there is an awful lot of work to do in a building that's showing its age. We're 21 years young this year. And Katrina Fallon has participated in an audit with us. And maybe if you click on to the next slide, you know, we received a report in addition to the training, the webinars, the conversations. This report yielded 62 very clear and concrete recommendations for Access as an organisation as to how we can improve both the carbon outputs of the organisation, but also changes to behaviour, changes to approach, changes to thinking, improvements as to how we communicate our commitment to climate adaptation on our policy, on our website, and how we follow up on that. 62 is overwhelming. We're chipping away at some of those. Others are way more daunting. And then there are stats about how our carbon footprint is reducing. It's quite an awful lot of work, but it is something that the entire team is now involved in, from the maintenance manager to the front of house staff to the creche workers, in ways that they can engage. So just to flip back and to how the department was established as a legacy from cultural adaptations, but again, thanks to investment from Creative Ireland, the Arts Council, we are now applying to and have been successful in securing pockets of funding, and it's more so to encourage people working in similar sectors that there are increased resources to operate in this area. There's a call out at the moment for any makers to design a mobile rain play structure in consultation with local children in Ballymun, who will be our resident experts, to design a mobile structure that's more fun when it rains. We've recently received some community water funding for more rain play structures and rain gardens. We're talking to our local Garda station in relation to how to put a rain garden outside their frontage. And then we've also supported other organisations in their work, and I think we're better positioned to support artists who are seeking to make work with climate either at its heart or certainly a more adaptive process, because we are increasing our understanding and our capacity. So Rising Tide, is just an example on that. And thanks to Creative Ireland, the Community Vaults project that we did last year now informs pretty much every thought and conversation we have with local organisations as to how we can be more adaptive with our next collaboration with them. So these are just some promo slides just to give a glimpse of the work I've just outlined. Again, Rising Tide, it's not our project, but we are a Dublin partner. We're a Dublin base for work that will engage with young people over the summer. This is just the workshop that happened last November, and the conversations that led to will now see a rain garden being installed in, on the main street in Ballymun. A very, very concrete structure is now going to be animated and also more climate adaptive, thanks to Maeve's ideas and our success in the funding stream. Just going to finish with the word start. If for anybody like me, you are working in an organization where professionally as well as personally, it's quite overwhelming to consider how to do more and to be better in terms of climate adaptation. And Maeve, gave me the gift of saying, we all just need to get to our own version of the starting line and to keep going. And anytime, I feel a little bit wobbly about how vast the climate crisis is and how small I am in the grand scheme of things, Maeve's encouragement to get to my own starting line is there. And I'm just going to leave you with an image I saw on Twitter last week that kind of sums up where Axis is at in relation to being an arts centre within a community space, within quite an urban community in Dublin, and that we're getting there. We can all chip forwards. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Niamh. Just conscious that we're running a little bit late, but thanks so much to Maeve and to Niamh for that brilliant, insightful, the Green Arts Department, what a resource and what a legacy amongst all the other work that you're doing from the Cultural Adaptations Project. I'm going to hop over and let Philippe take the stage, and then we're going to join. I can see Rita and Instant Dissidents in the background. We'll Hello, Philippe.
Hello, yes.
Hi.
I wasn't sure if I'm on already. I'm also just starting my presentation. Good morning, everyone from Amsterdam. And thanks for having me in this. My slides are only a bit of as an illustration and background of some of the stories and experiences and views we have developed as European Cultural Foundation over the past years, decade, and more recently in the field of cultural mobility. Let me start with this slide, and I think my what I'm gonna talk sits very nicely with what the previous speakers, especially the previous presentation and the next one, will talk about. So we have been, as European Cultural Foundation, around for 70 years. We are one of the few, if not the only, independent cultural foundation that works in with a really clearly European mission, and is particular across European borders, and in particular when artists work across borders. This is why I often start talks with this image of a project that has been taking place in a region that is very much at the attention now again. On the left side, you see Poland. On the right side, see Ukraine. In the middle, you see the EU borders and artists. The artist Jaroslav Koziara from Poland created this image of a fish with plows. Farmers used on both sides of the borders to create the cross borders. So this is very much of the heart of what the European Cultural Foundation has been supporting artists for, and in the field of cultural mobility. As I mentioned, we are like a very we have been working in the field of bringing Europeans together and bring them together across borders, which involves travel for a very long time. We have invented together with the European Commission the Erasmus scheme in the 80s, and have for more than 15 years supporting artists to travel, to visit peers, conferences, to create together across borders. Some of our more prominent programs in that field are the Step Beyond travel grants for artists and activists, which we have been running from 2005 to 2020. Some of you who are listening now today will also be familiar with our tandem programs. in which we have been bringing together cultural initiatives from inside the European Union and outside the European Union in a longer term process of a year of strategically engaging with other across borders and exchanging with each other, developing long-term collaboration initiatives. All this has actually made us sort of like in our advocacy work towards the European Commission, the European institutions, and also the European Union member states, a pioneer of promoting mobility of artists and cultural workers across borders, which at some time brought us also in the past 2 years to realize one of the two pilot projects of the European Commission in the field of supporting the mobility of artists and cultural workers. I suppose many of you will also be familiar with this I-Portunus project, pilot project, which has been running over the past a longer period. With the first phase 3 years, the project we have been running has just kicked off as a continuation, so to say, of our STEP cultural mobility support travel grants and the tandem programs, and brought us right into the pandemic with a large scale travel support program, which created a set of like very interesting experiences also in terms of providing digital alternatives to linking people across borders. We have been realizing these programs with an NGO from Berlin called Mid-Ost and the public foundation from Croatia, from Zagreb, called Kultura Nova. And the green dimension of how we can make travel support programs greener and reduce their climate impact has been at the heart of our pilot work in making these I-Portunus grants from the beginning. But because of the pandemic and because of the debates becoming more prominent through the Green Deal and everything we heard before already, thinking about the future of cultural mobility and how it can be realized in a much greener way and really come into action became much more prominent in this field as well. I should also mention that this particular pilot project, I-Portunus houses, was actually not only for individual travelers, but also for the hosts of individually traveling artists and cultural workers, which of course gave a particular component also in relation to what we already heard about Judys Bicycle, in terms of how host organizations, how cultural institutions that receive travelers can become more greener in their actions in even hosting organizations. This was only a part of the experiences we picked up, as most of the work on the data we also analyzed and the thinking we had developed already before was focusing on the climate damaging impact of traveling, and especially air traveling. Our 300 artists and cultural workers who have been traveling through this I-Portunus scheme are still actually traveling this month and next month, because things have been delayed very much by the pandemic. As I mentioned already, digital exchange and collaboration formats have been playing a role, but I have to say we came to the very sobering insight also that still 70% of the traveling we supported took place as air travel and by plane, which is of course anything else than what should happen or could happen in the future. So one of the issues around this still way too much air travel focused issue we came up with is that the cost of flights are simply too cheap, and we started experimenting with increasing the price of travels by increasing or actually adding a surcharge, a climate surcharge on travel we support, which we would then invest in a scheme that is sometimes also criticized, as we are very much aware of, with offsetting part of the CO2 emissions via, there are many organizations through which you can do that. We chose for like very high standard doing this through Atmosphere, which is a big organization in Germany, which invests in all sorts of scientific, but also directly climate offsetting schemes. And then we came to the conclusion that even adding the price of offsetting climate impact per ton of CO2 was actually still not enough to increase the price of flights to an extent that it would really be disincentive for taking the plane and not the train. So we are at the moment busy with a study that our I.Portunus partner Cultura Nova is developing based on the data we collected from these 300 I.Portunus travelers, and we will come throughout summer and until after summer with a number of scenarios, or with a proposed scenario how the future of cultural mobility could look like in the next years or in the next decades. One element we already know now is that offsetting of those flights which are inevitable will play a role also in the future, because there are certain destinations around Europe which you cannot reach without a plane if you're on an island, or if you're in Georgia or further away. So it should also not lead to social exclusion, of course. The second element is that we have started in the foundation also to make our travel policies much more mandatory in terms of destinations where you have to take the train. And for example, 7 hours that can be reached within train in SCF, you're not allowed to take the plane anymore. So we believe that things have to become much more mandatory and less awareness raising, as we have been doing in the cultural field for a long time. And the last element, which I think we will hear more about in the project the speakers after me gonna introduce, is that we came to a scenario that we basically have to promote much more a slow culture of slowing down our traveling. This I.Portunus scheme was also advocating a lot again for like very high-paced, short travel, flying in, flying out kind of like culture, which was only slowed down by the pandemic. But our scenario, which we're gonna propose in this study, also will be to develop schemes, and I think some of the examples we have heard already clearly have shown great examples how that can work in the future, to slow down, to make things more regional, and in particular also to become really to move from raising the awareness and combining policy change also with concrete action. I give you an example of one cultural center which has been doing this already 15 years ago. This is from a cultural center called Stanica in Žilina. They have been building this theater made of beer crates and straw balls, as you can see, 15 years ago already. They were part of the European volunteer service and worked with European volunteers to build this theater. Honestly, this is an initiative which has been in our field of work one of the few that has been doing that already 15 years ago, working very much also focusing on regional work and regional centers, and the slower pace of not flying in and out constantly. And I think we'll need much more of that. And let me and that requires, I think, for all of us in the field, from artists, institutions like ours, to become much more into concrete action and to act according to what we preach. And maybe let me put this at the end, which we had in a book we did together with Dan Berzowski 5 years ago, that maybe also artists become much more activists, climate activists themselves through their practice, through the work they do, like we have seen in the examples before, and I believe we'll also see in the examples after us. Our study is gonna become public after summer, and we'll share it broadly through various channels also. And I hope that the future of the Creative Europe supported, or the European Commission's mobility program, is also much more slowing down and finding new formats of engaging each other across borders that are maybe along the lines of what our colleagues from the minibus I see online already will gonna tell us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philipp. Thanks a million. I'm really looking forward to hearing those recommendations in the report and the kind of scenarios you're talking about there. Yeah, we're definitely bursting against time. I don't know how much we'll have left for questions, but anyway, let's keep going. We have Rita Marcallo, as I mentioned, and Instant Dissidents, who can join us, hopefully. I think we're...
Now?
Yeah, hello, can we hear you? There she is.
Hello, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Hello, everyone. This is Rita, Artistic Director of Instant Dissidents. And before I say a little bit about the project, I'm going to get the rest of the company to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Diogo. I'm from Portugal, and I'm one of the company dancers.
Hi, I'm Jerry. I'm from Belfast, and I'm also a company dancer.
Hi there, I'm Sophie. I'm from Dublin, Ireland, and I am on tour with the company as tour producer.
Hi, I'm Tilda. I'm from Denmark, and I'm also a company dancer.
Hello, I'm Amber. I'm from Belgium, and I'm the last company dancer.
Brilliant. So Eva and I actually pre-recorded my participation today because we are traveling, but I'll just say a little bit about the project. So the project that we are touring at the moment is called Slow-Mo, connecting Clock Jordan Eco-Village to continental Europe via land, sea, and dance. And in this project, we slow travel first from Clock Jordan, County Tipperary to Cyprus. We are currently in Turkey, so this is day 10 of our travel, and we've been through so Clock Jordan, Dublin, Holyhead, London, Paris, Munich, Budapest, Bucharest, Dimitrovgrad, and now Turkey. And yesterday in Turkey, we rehearsed the dance responding to the letter of our Cyprus co-creator with connections to Turkey. And tomorrow we will cross finally on the ferry into Cyprus to do our first performances. So I won't say much more because everything will be on the pre-recorded interview. If you want to follow our journey, follow us on Instagram or on Facebook. And if you have any questions, because I won't be part of it, just email them to Eva and then she'll be able to send them to me. Is that it, guys? Yeah. Do you want to say goodbye?
Bye. Thanks for joining us live. Okay, we're going to go to this short video. I probably won't play the whole lot because we are crunching the time here, but we'll play this interview that I made with Rita earlier on this week, just because we thought that, yeah. Hi, good morning, Rita. How are you? You're joining us from
Munich.
From Munich. Well, welcome here to our program today, or our event today, and also I hope it's great in Munich. Is it nice weather?
Yeah, it's quite sunny, blue skies, a great day for rehearsals actually. So the dancers are outside in a park nearby rehearsing at the moment, so it's lovely weather for that.
Great. Well, we'll just start with you yourself, if you wanted to introduce yourself and Instant Dissidents maybe, and the project a little bit. That'd be great.
Sure. So I'm Rita Marcalo. I'm the Artistic Director of Instant Dissidents, which is a company based in Clockjordan Eco Village in County Tipperary. I'll just say a few things about Instant Dissidents. So we think of ourselves as an ecologically and socially engaged company. So socially engaged because I'm really interested, as the company's artistic director, really interested in work which is socially relevant to audiences and more often than not co-created with audiences. And ecologically engaged because I'm interested in work that will potentially propose systemic changes that will enable us to fight the climate emergency. And I suppose the other thing to say about Instant Dissidents is that I have a very specific way in which I deal with authorship of work. So that's why I never present work in my name, Rita Marcalo. I see myself as an instigator of work. And then I bring in the artists and the people who I think are the right people to help me bring it into being. But I see the authorship as shared by all of us, the artists, and more often than not, also shared by the co-creators, audience co-creators to help us make the work. So it's a very diluted authorship, I suppose, the way I see it. So the work that I'm making here in Munich today, and that we're touring at the moment, is called Slow-Mo. And Slow-Mo is, I have a good description here, which I'm bringing up so I don't forget it. So it's an outdoor dance work, which is being created as we travel from Clockjordan Eco Village to our performance destination. Currently, it's Cyprus, so we're traveling to Cyprus. And it's a very specific model that I've never done before, and I'll explain what it is and why I am trying it. So one of the drives is a question that I've had for a while, which is, I live in an eco village, I made certain changes in my personal life so that I am part of kind of creating a different system of living, maybe more sustainable for the environment. And then what about my practice? I could just localize and work locally, which I'm doing as well, but I love working internationally. And so the question came, how do I work internationally in a way that is more sustainable than flying from A to B? And so this idea of traveling via land and sea came into my mind. And then the next question was, but that is so expensive, because if it takes you as 12 days to get from Clockjordan to Limassol in Cyprus, those are 12 days where we're having to pay per diems, dancer contracts, hotel, and that's not even talking about how much more expensive trains and ferries are than flights. So the solution that I'm trying is the idea of, instead of the usual touring model, which is you spend 6 weeks in a studio making the work and then you tour the work, what I'm doing is I'm collapsing the creative process into the touring process. And in doing so, shortening, I suppose, the longer time that it's taking us to tour the work is approximately what would take us to create and then tour if we were flying. So it's economically, we make it viable this way. So that's one of the drivers for this model. And then the other driver is another question that I have around. So as somebody who makes socially engaged work in my locality, I'm very connected to my audiences because they are my local audiences in Clockjordan, County Tipperary. And then touring is a different kind of thing where you kind of drop into these cities if you follow the usual model. And your audiences don't know you, you don't know your audiences, you don't know how your work is going to sit, whether it's relevant, whether it's not relevant. And there's something, of course, about newness and that kind of clash of cultures, which is interesting. But so many people do that. And because I'm interested in connection much more than I'm interested in newness, then my question was, how do I make internationally touring work, which is locally meaningful to the audiences I am traveling to? So then the answer that we're trialing at the moment is the idea that we are creating the work from stories of the audiences that we're traveling to. So just to give you an example, yesterday we were in Paris. Prior to leaving Jordan, a person who lives in Cyprus wrote us a letter of an experience that they had in Paris a few years ago. We've had that letter for ages, so we could plan. So yesterday, when we got to Paris and got off the train, we responded through that letter, through embodiment, through dance. And now we have this little nugget, this little vignette, I call them, of the Paris dance. And then today we're doing the same with the Munich letter. So we are making work about people in Limassol, in Cyprus, their own stories and their own memories of all the places that we have to travel through to get to them. And so my hope is, and this is a question, I don't know, I'm waiting for the audiences to tell me, but my hope is that, of course, for those people, that the work will be locally meaningful, but that it will also be locally meaningful, more locally meaningful to other people, because they know that this is what we've done. And it's all about traveling to Limassol, and it's all about the people of Limassol and their stories. And then the other kind of connection is that the soundtrack that we're using for each performance is set by the partners of each country. So our Limassol partners have given us the track, which is a local track by a local Cypriot artist. And so again, we're trying to make those connections.
How she's going, sorry, I'm just going to stop it there. Why this is important, why she's trying out this model of touring, slow touring, and folding the creative process in together. And it's amazing. And I think what she said to me, that it's 70% more carbon neutral than the normal kind of fast-paced traveling. So that already, that's amazing target and amazing output already. So we're delighted that we had Rita and Instant Dissidents, and we can follow up with anything else, as you said, with questions. So I am going to hand it over to our next speaker, which is Tanya Bonatti from Creative Ireland. And the floor is yours, Tanya, if you wanted to share your presentation.
Thank you, Aoife. Hello, everybody. Lovely to see some friends and partners on the call. I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour through the Creative Climate Action Fund. And unfortunately, like everybody else, I have some slides. And sincere apologies in advance that I have to hop off the call, because I know the wonderful Bernadine is next and her project is brilliant. So without further ado, can people see this? Hopefully you can. A little bit of background around the Creative Climate Action, and for our international guests around the Creative Ireland programme. We're a government programme, and one of the things we've been asked to do is to get culture, creativity, the arts out of the silo of the Department of Culture, and to get all of government thinking about the role of culture and creativity in their areas. So that is the basis of our Creative Climate Action work. Essentially back in 2019, and I will put the link in the chat, we did a report with our colleagues in the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications. And it was really looking at work to date done by the arts and creative sector when it came to climate change. And that threw up quite a number of challenges. We followed it up with a workshop back at the end of 2020 involving both all the policymakers in the Department of Climate Action and Culture and the EPA, the SEAI, as well as artist representative groups. And essentially it culminated with a decision by the Department of Culture and the Department of Climate Action to work together. As far as we know, this is really the first time at a national level there's been such an explicit link between environmental policy and culture policy, and that's something that we really welcome. The programme for government gave a commitment by the parties in government to continue the work that we started. So it was on that basis that we've been working in the last 2 years. Essentially, what we did was we put together a €2 million fund split jointly between both departments. You can see here on the right the brief that we issued. I think it's important to stress that these were seeking collaborative projects that use the talents of the creative and cultural sector in the service of behaviour change. So in other words, it is not the kind of brilliant work that Katrina has been doing with the venues on carbon management. It is not art for art's sake, important though that is. There are many artists very concerned about the climate crisis. This is quite a specific thing. We are looking for the talents of the cultural and creative sector in the service of behaviour change, on the individual behaviour changes we all need to make in our lives. And the 15 pilot projects really, I think probably as Niamh mentioned, it's the gift of time. These are all pilots. They are all new. And in fact, with the exception of 2, they are all brand new collaborations amongst the parties. And we feel we will learn as much from what doesn't work as much as what does work. To add to the challenge, we are putting our feet to the flame, and we have engaged the Mare Centre in UCC, which has the reputation of being the leading knowledge centre for public engagement on climate change, to work with their researchers to ask ourselves, are these projects really moving the dial in terms of individual behaviour? We have a wide range of projects, and you can see their location around the country, and also a wide range of themes, which essentially are inspired by the National Dialogue on Climate Action, which is run by our colleagues in DECC. So these were the themes that we sought ideas on. I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour through the projects and also cite some of the many artists that are involved. First up is Líonta na Farraga, which is being led by Trinity College Dublin, working with Algorithm, the creative lighting agency, and Native Events, who are on this call. And they'll be working with 2 Finnish artists, and there will be some dramatic light installations at iconic locations around the country being unveiled in September, really to communicate the impact of rising sea levels on the most vulnerable communities, with the opportunity for learning via scanning of QR codes, websites, and all the public media that will go around the unveiling of what will hopefully be very beautiful light installations. Rising is a project which has just concluded, which was led by the community unit in Trinity, together with Broken Talkers Theatre Company. It had its first outing as part of the Dublin Theatre Festival, and essentially has been working with a number of individuals in the Dublin Docklands, an interesting mixture of people who might be long-term residents and a lot of the new communities that have moved into the Docklands. Again, thinking about what are the changes that need to be made in our own lives in the Docklands. I had the privilege of taking part in it as a resident. There was lots of tea drunk and some singing, and there was a presentation of our work and how far we've got at the Lear about a month or so ago. Decarbonising Together is a project that's being led by Limerick County Council, City and County Council. And indeed, this fund has deliberately structured itself that there are a small number of local authority-led projects. This is because the state is increasingly giving huge responsibility, roles and resources to local authorities in terms of climate adaptation. So we were interested in working with local authorities and local communities and seeing how that works, as opposed to working with different artists and creative-led organisations and seeing the kind of different approaches. Essentially, this is going to work with a number of communities across Limerick. It's building on a project that has already happened. And in a lot of these cases, we don't yet know what form this project will take. There's been extensive community consultation along the way to find out what projects, what artistic and creative intervention will resonate with this local community. This is the wonderful artist Lisa Fingleton, featured with some of the West Kerry dairy farmers. This is an extraordinary project, very proud to have supported it, led by the wonderful Katrina Fallon, amongst others. It is very unusual to have 15 small dairy farmers agree to have an artist embed with them for an entire year. And again, the gift of time. Lisa is both a farmer and an artist. She is accompanying the farmers on all their familiarization visits over the next 12 months, and she's documenting that through her creative writing, illustration, and painting. We had the first outing at the Mart in Dingle last month, and we think it's really interesting that the farmers are now really comfortable having the artist embed with them, and also much more confident in talking to fellow farmers about the impact that this project is having on their farming practice. Ripple is a project led by the UCD Centre for Irish Towns, which we felt was going to be an interesting link up, working with dance artist Rinach Neil, and the ambition of Ballina to be Ireland's greenest town. And again, that is unfolding in the months ahead. We felt it was a really interesting opportunity when we were approached by the Bohemian Football Club, which is in fact the first football club in the world to have a climate justice officer. So much so that AC Milan sent representatives over to figure out what was happening. It's led by the wonderful Sean, who already has a huge track record in this area. And although I'm putting up on the screen some of the things that Sean will be doing, it is indeed only a fraction of his ambition. We will be working with prisoners in Mountjoy on bicycle repair workshops. There will be a film festival with the theme of climate change taking place outdoors in the summer in the stadium. And you can see the number of artists that he's working with as part of the walking app, taking us from the gates of the Phoenix Park right up to Bowes Stadium. So again, what does engaging football fans on the subject of climate change using the creative sector actually look like? We're going to find out. Field exchange, probably the artist John Gerard needs no introduction to this audience, and his sister, the farmer Ailva Gerard, working with the artist Deirdre O'Mahony on a series of artistic presentations and interventions on Ailva's farm in Tipperary, also working with the National Organic Training Skill Net. There will be a series of visits by local Tipperary farmers. There will be feasts, we will all eat together, and the artists will describe their practice and will discuss with the farmers. Again, just very interesting to see the contrast between farmer-led projects and projects taking place in very urban communities. Repair Acts is being led by the artist Teresa Dillon, Dr. Clavin from the UCD School of Geography, the PPN in Westmeath, and the Heritage Officer in Westmeath. It will be popping up at different events in Westmeath over the summer, and it's looking at that whole issue about care, repair, recycling, reuse, and that whole piece, and really getting the local community in Westmeath to think more deeply about that. Creative Climate Action Crumlin, referred to earlier, is being led by Dublin City Council with the really active community in Crumlin that already had quite a lot of work going on with community groups in terms of cleanup, with a cycle group. And now we're bringing in artists and artists already living in Crumlin to work with the local community on specific issues around climate change in their area. Sorry, I'm racing through this here. The Callan Energy Store has in fact just concluded with the wonderful talents of Asylum Theatre Company, the Circus Lucy Smooks, and took place in an old electricity power company actually in Callan, bringing the talents of our performing artists and sustainability experts, with literally people who had recently bought an electric car, people who can talk to you about retrofitting your home, all of these practical issues. But really how to do it in an engaging way that will invite the people of Callan in Kilkenny into a welcoming space to begin to have those conversations. Baint an Air, you can see the artist leading that project in Oncararua in the Connemara Gaeltacht, one of 2 projects taking place through Irish. And again, these are obviously previously turf cutting communities. There will be, the practical output will be some renewable energy generating artworks, which will power some of the local buildings. And finally, the Kinship project in Cork City Council. Again, a local authority-led project working with Marilyn and Sean, the artists based in Cork, and a huge network of new partners. And again, everything I love about the Creative Climate Action Fund is the sheer number of collaborative partners in these projects for the first time. It is taking place on a newly opened park, which is, I think, about 145 acres of reclaimed land. And you can see the links there should you wish to follow the project. There are artist residencies. There's going to be a structure built out of the stuff that's dumped in the nearby recycling centre. There's a huge number of elements to this project. With thanks to Cork, I just wanted to throw up some of the things they've been doing just to unpack one project for you a little bit. So you can see that there's everything from a series of talks and artist placements, and there's a design and build competition. And we've been interested.
Thanks.
Sorry, can we mute everybody there again, please? Thanks a million.
We've been interested in the lessons learned so far by Cork County Council, because really we're learning as we're going. So they've just fed back to us recently some of the lessons that they've been learning as they go that I thought might be interesting for you to see. I won't go through them all in a huge amount of detail here. And I suppose plenty of information through our social media channels. If you wish to follow it, we do post updates on these projects, and I will put in the chat some more information on our website. Many thanks.
Brilliant, Tanya, thanks a million. My God, what a breadth of amazing projects there, and looking forward to hearing more about them as they unfold. And the future potentially of the next tranche, or the initiative going forward. I will pass you over to our final presenter today, and that's Bernadine from the Irish Architecture Foundation. Hi, Bernadine.
Hi.
Last but not least.
Yeah, I hope everyone hasn't disappeared off for their lunch yet. So
yeah,
I'll just okay, so is that viewable now?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So thanks for inviting me to share, and thanks for Tanya for the introduction as well, because this is one of the Creative Climate Action projects funded through Creative Ireland. And so our project's called Workers' Villages, and the aim is to collaboratively and creatively reimagine new futures for the Bordamona villages and their communities, celebrating the design vision of their architect, Frank Gibney. And through our process, we've got a new question that we're developing, which is how can we reimagine a new peatlands architecture? So this project emerges from a program that we run called Reimagine, which is a program that connects architects with communities to co-design solutions to local challenges. And through this originally was funded through Creative Ireland, and now is standalone, but one of the things that's come up through it is the idea that placemaking as a form of change management, that generally when communities are looking for help, that they're trying to rethink something, it's because something that's external to their own internal context is happening. So there is something to do with traffic management or something to do with a national policy that they're trying to address, and they need some form of support in verbalizing and vocalizing what they actually need within a larger planning process. So we work with lots of different types of communities in this, and looking at ultimately trying to affect a broader change outside of the communities, maybe feeding into maybe a spatial plan or applying for I.D.E.A funding within a national or within a larger town or county context. So it's been quite an interesting journey, and through that we are quite informed with placemaking concepts, but also things around urbanism and urban design. And in Ireland, not everyone lives in a city. We actually have a quite a high volume relatively of small towns and villages around Ireland. That means that there's a question over, well, what is placemaking? What is urbanism in a rural context? So first, we're thinking of how do we look at major changes. One of the largest changes that most of our communities are facing in Ireland at the moment is, or will be facing, is climate transition. But also, how do we look at that from a rural context? And one of the things that I found quite interesting in Ireland is that we have a very early model of rural urbanism in our country, and that was the villages that were designed for Bord na Móna villages and the Bord na Móna workers in the 1950s. So that was the first housing scheme of the state outside of cities. It was a real departure for how we develop our rural communities, that instead of our sporadic housing around the peatlands, which would have been the original plan for housing for the workers until Brian Gibney came along, or the long Shrodvallias. So you continue adding houses onto the end of your main street until your town is about 2 kilometers long and nobody can walk to the school or shop anymore, and you become more car dependent. So what he proposed was a new type of housing design, which essentially clustered houses together in new communities. But a little bit about the contextual project itself. So after independence, Ireland was still dependent on England for its energy source, and it also was a new country with a struggling economy and a big vision. So we had De Valera with his great ideas for modernising Ireland, and one of these projects was setting up a state-owned peat industry that would provide employment for people, but also provide energy sovereignty. This was located within the Midlands mostly, and actually was important for stemming a decline in rural towns and villages as well. So it was a way of, providing income for a population that was in a depopulating area. But what was quite interesting is that there was a nationalistic concept or idea behind this. If you work for Bord na Móna, you were helping your country, providing energy. Not only a new energy sufficiency, but for the first time, electrification for houses, electrification for hospitals. And we were very underdeveloped as a country. And this was a big step in developing this energy sovereignty. So this is the kind of pictures you would have seen then around the Midlands of manual labor, people working alongside machines in the peat fields. And then this progressed over the years where less people, more machinery. But this is a wagon carting milled peat from an extracted landscape in the Midlands. So this whole process went on for, since the 40s. And gradually we started to learn a bit more about climate action, and also must be noted, we're running out of peat. A lot of the peat fields are being mined completely till they're spent. So there was always going to be an end point for Bord na Móna as to how much it could extract. Over the period of 50 years, we saw a 24% loss in the peat in our raised bogs, which is the ones you see in the Midlands. So upland bogs are in the uplands, raised bogs are generally in the Midlands. And we've gotten to the point now where only about 10% of our peatlands are suitable for conservation. Peat is really important. It's more important to us than the Amazon in terms of carbon capture. 11 million tons of carbon is emitted each year through the mining, the burning, and the use of peat in the horticultural industry. So there is no, this project really isn't about challenging the use of peat. We know that it needs to stay in the ground, and we know that our peatlands need to be conserved. What we were quite interested in is maybe the change management around this, how the workers are treated and how the communities are treated in the process of transition away from the peat industry. So the landscape is quite relevant to the projects we're working in here. So we had our last full harvests in 2018, but we're working with communities that still see peat piled up that has been extracted, is just sitting there, hasn't been extracted. The idea was that it could be used for horticulture. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen now, but there's still the industrial evidence of peat extraction in the landscape. The Lockery power plant in Lanesborough, which is one of the communities we're connecting with, it closed in 2020. This is a peat burning plant. It seems crazy that we were doing this. And you can tell it wasn't built in the 1950s. It's quite a recent addition to the landscape here. And in 2024, that's the aim, to end burning peat briquettes. This is only one pathway of extraction of peat in our landscape. There's also what we know from more familiar is family-owned plots where people go out and hand cut, or for domestic use. That's one thing that's probably the most disputed, people are most familiar with, and it's probably wrapped up in a lot more of the debates around nostalgic use of peat in Ireland. But there's also the in-between, which is contractors and companies who extract for the horticulture industry, for mushroom farming, and that's something we don't go into. What we're looking at is the communities directly affected by the state-owned industry, and we're working for that industry itself. So the communities we're working with are in Roscommon, Longford and Kilcormac. We picked them, we started with Roscommon, and then we kind of built around that, communities that weren't too far away, that we could create some kind of regional connection with. And that's out of 7 villages that were designed in the 1950s for the workers. They all have a shared connection with the peat industry and have shared narrative, shared stories. When we go there, we hear about that there's a massive change happening in these communities, and it's quite, they feel like they aren't really being heard on a national scale. The architect, Frank Gibney, was quite interesting in that he was considered a state architect. He was designing a new vision for Ireland. And the communities are only now really starting to understand that significance on a national scale. His housing was quite interesting in that the way they were clustered together, we now consider that to be a sustainable urban plan. You know, the idea that you're grouping housing together, these potentially could have a shared heating scheme, for example. These are quite easily set up for sustainable, futures if they wanted to develop this in the future. But there was also interesting things around smaller gardens, but shared communal spaces. There's nice planting in the areas, and they're all very walkable. They're all very close to each other, but also local resources, a local school. They were designed quite simply, that they can be built quite fast, but they have feature houses that make them quite aesthetically interesting and gives them that design legacy, that you have this recognizable housing. There's lots of crosses because it's De Valera's projects, but you're also quite interesting because there's this kind of Irish religious modernism that you can see. And interestingly, they all have these little sheds at the back that have these air vents. That's for drying your own peat at home, your own turf. So they have this kind of evidence of being connected to the peat industry. And there's a nice mix of sizes, but they were all very easily managed. When you worked for Bord and Mona, you could get a house, pay really low rent, and then when it came an option that you could buy them out, all of your rent so far was counted towards the purchase price. So people were buying their houses out for about €3,000. So again, you started in Bord and Mona, you got a good job, you got good conditions, and you got a house. This is Clontuskert in Roscommon. Again, you have this archway with the cross, these nice houses that are close together, but with lots of green space around them. Lanesborough. The view from the on the left is actually from the Frank Gibney designed estate, so you can see the peat energy plant is just there in the background. The view on the right is from the Shannon, is from the riverside. And here's the advertisement that people responded to, which is that get a job, get a house, you can work in the Midlands. People came from all over Ireland to these communities, and also Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Germany. So these communities were not only vibrant, but they had a strong sense of blended identity. There was Irish speakers. There was and it was quite an exciting time to be growing up in these communities. Lots of children, lots of social outlets. So anyway, at the start of our project, we were going to be matching architects with each of the communities to look at something that they want to improve in a sustainable way. And pretty soon we found that there was a lot of trauma in the communities. There was a lot of sense of being left behind, of being overlooked, and that their voice and their stories being maybe lost in the whole mix of this dispute over the shutting down of the peat industry. So we created a very informal rules of engagement that just happened with the team we were working with. So we had a bunch of people working on the project. We have a filmmaker, we have a community engagement expert from Global Action Plan, an environmental organisation. We have, at this stage, we've got 4 architects working on the project and the community leaders. And the idea was that we are not going to criticise individual consumer behaviour, even though that should be an output of our project. But we wanted to, instead of looking at, okay, I see you're burning peat in your house, we want to look at how are you, how are you within this bigger political story? We're not going to criticise them for being angry at losing their jobs, because you have every right to be angry at losing your job and your income. These are communities that were able to move from abject poverty. A lot of communities, people who took these jobs didn't have running water, didn't have steady income. They were getting paid in, we heard stories of people getting paid in bags of potatoes instead of getting wages when they're working as laborers for other people in the area. So this provided decent work and decent pay. Their children were able to go to university. And you know, this is something that we have to give recognition to, that, you know, everyone has a right to be proud of their work, to recognize their skill set, and to be given the dignity of that recognition. So that, yeah, the idea was to focus on more structural challenges that we could be helping them address. In the first community in Clontusker, they have a schoolhouse that's a very important feature architecturally that's derelict. So that's a very obvious thing. But when we started digging a bit deeper, and we started to realize that what we would see this as the Frank Gibney village, the little community, it's like a housing estate, it didn't end where it ended on the map, that they have a very, their consciousness of their sense of place is totally embedded in the wider peatlands landscape and in the industrial spaces. So we started doing some consultations. We sent postcards around to people's houses, and we held some community events. We found that there was a lot of distrust in what our objectives were, that maybe, you know, there isn't, you know, they've been through this before. They've been through consultations where nothing has happened. So our job is to try and rebuild trust and maybe really try and understand why a community is so exhausted, and how can we help them make sure that they are protected in the just transition process. So on the right hand side is some of the drawings that our architects were doing to try and really map out what spaces people use, what spaces are important for people, and what kind of future they'd like to hold. I should say that we're working really closely with the Tidy Towns and Community Development Organisation here, who have really big plans for what happens here. And so what they were doing is to try and really get past this divisive issue, which is the peat industry closure, you know, that has created a divide in the community. How can they actually recognize that there could be optimism and hope in climate actions, that they aren't all just things that have negative impacts in their lives? So on the left hand side, you can see the schoolhouse. That's an opportunity site for us to maybe turn into a community space. And we did a lot of different types of processes, community events, online consultations. This is a kind of a new mapping that the architects are trying to look at, which is, you know, what kind of spaces that can we reclaim for the community? You know, can we still access the peatlands surrounding their community? So the brown bits are the bog that they would have worked as workers. And this is the middle, they're right in the middle of it. So is there new greenways that they can propose that will allow them to maintain a connection with the landscape? So this is another site that, when in consultation with the community, we found that even though the Clontusker community lives across the road, this is Ballyglass, is an industrial works site, and that they have a really strong sense of connection to and responsibility for, that they are concerned about this space, that it's part of their community, that their original ancestors would have lived in these huts over here before the housing was built. These are army huts. This is it's an archive photo here, and this is the workshops that they would have worked in to design and build the machinery that was used to work on the peatlands. So these are the original camps, but they're also talking about the industrial heritage that's embedded in the landscape, that's either going to be, there's a risk of it being ripped up and just being sold for scrap. But they're thinking, how can we use this as opportunities for things like greenways, and even just a recognition that their lives existed, you know, even if the peat is restored, you know, that there is some evidence that they had a relationship with this landscape. They were concerned about this machinery, which is right behind their housing, that they would have, again, worked. They understand it deeply. Nobody else really understands how this machinery connects to the landscape aside from the workers. This is inside the workshop spaces. There's a lot of concern around, like, we had quite an interest in the ephemeral heritage. So things like the signage, the health and safety notices, there's jackets still hanging up in lockers, there's boots on the ground, there's notebooks with lunch orders in it. There's only these things that are left behind as if people went out to lunch one day and didn't come back, which is, for some people, you know, it feels like that. They were given a year's notice that their industry was closing down. So that's inside that workshops there. And this is quite an interesting thing again, which these are two former workers in Offaly. This is a model of the industry of the peat model of the peat processing that was created by a now deceased worker at home at the kitchen table, to the chagrin of his wife, who really missed her kitchen table, which is now on display here. But this was just again, they have this pride and dignity in the work they created, and that they wanted to this is uses a learning model that they weren't worried that it was going to be thrown out. So they managed to liberate it. So we took lots of different processes then to try and create, I guess, a shared understanding and of this industrial heritage and of this culture, because we feel like that when the trauma is so hard that the community are finding it hard to really verbalize, why does this have value on a national scale? And we can see it. And even the environmental organization we're working with, we're looking at it and thinking, if we don't understand or create a broader understanding of the importance of industrial heritage and of this stage, we won't be able to move past it. We won't be able to go on to the next stage. So this is a biodiversity walk we did with Global Action Plan on the spent peatlands. So you can see the machinery there. But this is a former worker, and he's pointing out where he used to hear a cuckoo. You know, there's a huge understanding of the landscape here, that the workers are the ones who know it the best. And it was quite a depressing walk, in that a lot of the land has been extracted beyond conservation. It's no longer peatland. It's now a different ecosystem. So we were hoping to be able to map out routes where people can actually go back and re-engage with the peatlands. But you know, it mightn't work that way now. And we also ran community gatherings, so bringing together a couple of the members from the different communities who really care about maybe future plans. So we went to Lochbora to look at the work that was done there. We also looked at this interesting raised boardwalk architecture that was actually developed by some of the community members that we're working with in Lochbora as a sensory garden. So we have these community workshops, community gatherings to again try and create this a kind of more a constructive shared understanding of what a future sustainable development will be, that responds and respects their own industrial story as well. And through this, we came across some really interesting stories that for us really underline why there is a hurt here. And it's that these communities have a historic connection with the landscape that precedes Bord na Móna. You know, when the communities talk about the bog, they don't talk about a very specific plot or space. They're talking about a psychological space, the same way, you know, you might talk about the sea. They talk about the bog as this space that's shared, has a sense of commonage to it, and it's shared history to it. In the church in Kilcormac, there's a Pieta. It's a wooden statue that has a really interesting story. When Cromwell was coming and pillaging Catholic churches and eradicating a culture, the community grabbed this Pieta statue and they buried it in the bog, where it was preserved for 80 years, unto the point where the last man who knew where it was buried was brought out in a sick bed to try and point it out so they can dig it up and reinstate it. You know, so they see the bog to them is something that helps them preserve their culture. It's something that had a very practical function. This is Shauna. She's the head of the Tidy Town. She's one of her key partners on this project. And this is her age 19, having discovered a bog butter artifact while her summer job for 7 years was working the machines for Bord na Móna. And she found this, and this is something she still talks about with huge pride, that she was able to work with the archaeologists in setting up in this process of digging up and bringing this piece of bog butter to the museum and being involved in that archaeological process. And so again, part of the pain is that while we're looking at these great ideas, we're talking about creating wonderful features around raised boardwalks. How do we protect the architectural or the industrial heritage? Do we create a museum? Do we try and turn this schoolhouse into this interpretation center? And at the same time, when we go out of a meeting and I go online and I see that the community haven't been told about this, but there's an auction of 200 Bord na Móna pieces of machinery that happened just the other week, that we found out a day in advance. So there was no way of even putting together a plan to try and protect some of the machinery or trackways that are being sold. So we feel like we're really fighting time with this. So coming up as part of this project, we're going to be having an event in the new European Bauhaus, which you mentioned there, and we're going to be looking at some of the industrial heritage projects in the Ruhr region in Germany. The schoolhouse, we want to turn it into this we want to re-roof it and turn it into a space for really thinking interrogation the future. We want to look at a workers' trail, so like really representing the workers' stories in the architecture as a walking trail around the community there, and create a film gathering in Longford over the summer. And we're going to be present at the Flying Championships and have an exhibition in Dublin as well that's going to showcase some of the films that we've created and some of the outputs. But anyway, what's that's got to do with climate change? Because some of this, we have to always really look at making sure that we're not trying to over-romanticize peat extraction, because it's something that was hugely damaging for our environment. But if we don't really come up with a good way of working with communities that are adversely affected by our climate actions, we're not really going to get very far. It's potentially going to disengage people, but realistically we might be perpetuating inequalities in communities, because the workers are generally not the ones at the top of the pecking order anyway. But also we need to really consider how we're maintaining human relationships with this landscape, that we're not just clearing all evidence of human interaction with the peatlands when we're doing conservation work, because these people have had this relationship for thousands of years. And, you know, Bord na Móna came for a period of time, but they were with the landscape long before that. And then also based on, what people have said to me a couple of times, which is there's a lot of people earning money by doing work through the just transition process. There's a lot of consultations, a lot of people like me coming in and doing projects. So at some point we need to really be thinking about, well, what are these communities actually going to get out of this? What's the benefit? So what we're proposing is to develop a new peatlands architecture, something that incorporates the industrial heritage, the story of the people's relationship with the landscape, that celebrates their hard work and their labour, and the story of the Bord na Móna villages, but also looking at new architecture, at the new conservation work, at the new boardwalks that are being created, but also new ways of engaging with the landscape through things like accommodation, watchtowers that really help us rebuild and restitch together our relationship with the peatlands. That's me. Thank you.
Wow, brilliant. Thanks a million, Bernadine. That is a huge project ongoing, obviously, and has a future. Hopefully we'll see, as you're saying, those kind of new ways of looking at it, but definitely protecting the people who are so close to it. Thanks a million. We're obviously running over time, but anyway, we did I didn't want to cut in because I know all the presentations took a long time to put together, and they're really, really amazing and interesting. Thanks for everyone coming along today. If you do have any questions, you send them on to us